So you see videos like these during exam season.
高三8班全体起立，银安白马，逐梦韶华。高三8班全体上士，举起右拳，跟我写下。明确目标，怀抱梦想，把握今天，坚定信仰，思想专注，重在可能，勤学苦练，基础为纲，戒骄节奏，自律坚持，不屈不放，超越自我，引爆能量，有缘没有，月牙。
These type of videos where folks argue over small problems are very common in China. So is this type of video, a woman on her knees begging to be paid for the labor that she had done. And this is a video of local authorities sending in thugs to attack farmers after banning them from farming on the land. Videos like these are just from the last day or so on Twitter. But this is a reflection, a speck of a vastly miserable lifestyle that Chinese people live through. Unfortunately, this has been forced upon them amidst wealth discrepancies, social class differences, and the fact that in China, money means everything. China today, after 75 years of communist rule, has become a reality check for many people. But no other generation or group of people in China has been hit the hardest by this reality check than young people today. This is a photo uploaded to Chinese social media. What many young people in China resonated with is the fact that this is viewed as their life cycle. From graduating to go to a college, acing their entrance exam, to graduating college, and then coming out of the job, and then putting on that yellow delivery man outfit. Because that's what many grads are now going into. Instead of going into what they study for their post-secondary career, they're now doing delivery jobs or different sorts of low-income or low-wage paying jobs to get by. Expectation versus reality in China.
多了出这美丽的世界。拿快，可以了吗？你们敢做啊！我中央大学毕业了，之前还是学生主席，这工资才1000八，你到底看不起谁啊？我直接。
老鼠死得多，老鼠死得快，老鼠走过当场是。
敢这么一个月，我全国武术冠军，狗都不是这样录的吧？长不了是吧？长不了那。欢迎叶子回家，你保驾护航。我的梦想是当一名优秀的乒乓球运动员，我要努力训练，早日打出水准。
像我这种学医的，要救死扶伤，千方百计为病人解决病痛，是令人冒险。姐，这里的故事还可以啊。他说，我给你轻点哈，因为看办公的有些会员开先把白发呀，500哈。
我学的是市场的营销，以后我可是要调控市场宏观和微观经济的。我一毕业，我们小区前面医院，后面学校，左边商场，右边公交，你考虑这一个机会给这姐。
Now, this sentiment is quite popular and visible amongst young people, and they're starting to adopt this new terminology, which is called juan or inner juan. And it is used to describe the fierce competition in China from things like dating to house to, how many views do you get online, or just anything that can be used to compete against others. And they really go into like the minor things. And because after the Chinese society screws them over because of the government and the party policies, and they have really no other ways but to adopt this mindset, this idea of inner juan, in order to survive their way through how the current society is treating them. Now, this is actually considered the good part of it. The bad part is that many others who have been pressured so much that they can't take it anymore has started suffering the direct and dramatic consequences of the government policies. One of them is because the expectation is so different from reality. They were raised by parents who maybe went to college during a time when it initially was still good. And they were raised to think that by studying hard, by working hard in this society, they can contribute to be a productive member of society after they graduate and landing in a job that is supposed to do that. But the reality is very different. The city of Shanghai, or that there's so many facades that they put up over the years. But in reality, these videos tell us the real life experience of people in China today. And so many people, again, young people especially, they come to the realization that what the government's been telling them is very different than what they're really experiencing. That's why there are tens of thousands of people trekking across Latin America to go to Mexico, to the US southern border, because they rather risk the danger of walking and traveling through cartel and conflict zones than to stay another day in China, right? So the risk of staying in China is higher to them than to walking that dangerous journey of running the line to come to the United States. Now, as we sit here, this last weekend, 13 million students in China just took the entrance exam for their college, or called Gaokao, which is basically the life and death exam for their future. And again, ultra competition and the reality of pointless college degrees in China. For one, different provinces in China have different difficulties when it comes to the testing and when it comes to the score requirements, and as well as competitions because some certain provinces, for example, have more student populations taking the exam. So obviously, if you're the best of the best, you may not be the best of the best. So I personally know a PhD student who could not make it in China, not because he wasn't smart enough, but because the competition is so fierce that he had to come to a top Western university and study here instead because he couldn't get into a like a top tier college in China because of these competition, right? You're up against twice the size of students than if you would in many different other countries. And for second, now today, college degrees in China mean nothing. Even master's degrees mean nothing. PhDs, maybe. But that's the reality because today it's been diluted that pretty much everybody can go to college, but because there's not enough jobs available to those of the same level, then competition becomes fierce. So the standard for what is considered to be a great student has moved up tremendously, yet the level of support and where they can go afterwards has not moved at all. In fact, it has decreased since the post-COVID era. You have as many college graduates coming out as many that are going in taking the college exam.
不要听张雪峰那小子的话啊！新闻学卓越人才实验班，5院4系，华东政法大学，100，直接他妈入职美团。
So every year you have 8 to 10 million people who are taking the exam, and you have about 8 to 10 million people coming out of college after 4 years who are now basically a burden to the job market, not because they are bad, but because there's simply not enough to satisfy the needs of of course, the jobs. And so it's a PvP competition in China. And that's just the urban city we're talking about. In rural areas, there's much less access to good jobs, let alone, anything that basically could be life-changing to their entire family. Now, we know that the SATs here in the United States is very competitive, right? You need a good SAT score if you want to get into the Ivy Leagues or whatnot. But that's not the end of the line if you don't. And simply because, there are different things like community colleges, there's other universities you can transfer through. It's a very different thing in China. For one, you're against double the applicant pools when it comes to graduation. From different organizations in the US, you see about 3.8 million graduates in the year of 2023. In China, it's double that. And this year, it's even more considering it's 13.42 million high school graduates that are taking the college exam. So because of the sheer number of competitors you have, think about it, that alone is already enough pressure for them. So in the 13 million here, a third of it are redos. And so basically they restudy for a year and they try to take the exam again to improve the score. But that's usually not the case for majority of the people because the later you go to college, the worse the job market could become or things could change, right? So most people just, do the first year. Now, of course, students still travel overseas to study abroad, try to get a foreign degree. That was considered a good option back in the days. But as news suggests recently, many government positions no longer hire those that have lived outside of China for 6 months or more. And so that's, again, because of the national security policies that the CCP has put out for so-called stability. Now, Chinese students who have lived abroad for more than 6 months are not eligible for those positions, like policemen, etc. Not that you want to work for the government anymore anyways, because there's job cuts, there's wage cuts, because local governments are running out of money to support their workforce. And so these public servants, there's one case reported by the South China Morning Post that they were complaining that after she graduated with a literature degree, she was sent into the Gobi Desert, into this small town, what she called is a backwards little country, and she basically complained. Now, this drew widespread criticism and also some support as well for her words because, people are like, you should be grateful that you even have a job, a public servant job, that is. To other people, this is a stable job. To some people, this is a job. And to her, she actually has a job. Now, she got a job, what used to be described as the rice bowl of iron, meaning that it's job security. It's like the best thing you can get for somebody who's gone to college and wanting to, improve their life. Now, people here always talk about the idea of equity versus equality, right? Ignore all that. Just look at what's happening in China. This is supposed to be the champion, right, of utopia, of socialism, of equity or whatnot. And yet you have the biggest wealth discrepancy. You have the biggest corruption. You have the biggest problems when it comes to competing, like for young people, which is supposed to not happen in this so-called equitable situation. But here we are. Because the only thing that matters in China is who do you know? Which connection do you have? If you want a job, even at a little company, you need to know the right people. So relationships are so important in China. Now, I spent my time exposing the so-called beautification or the facades of China, right? We have the tofu buildings, the so-called beautiful skylines, all the scenic areas, etc. being fake, the fake waterfalls. That's all great. But deep down, there is a part that I constantly feel like, it's a scenario I have in my head, right? Thinking about my own experience, would I be in a different situation had I still lived in China? Would I have a future? Now, this question has always bothered me, looking especially at this topic. It's very tough to talk about because there are so many like me, around my age or younger, who are now living through the situation in China. And so I'm always thinking like, how lucky am I to come out and to not have to deal with those consequences? Because I come from a very ordinary family and there is no way for me to make it out, doing what I do now, unless there is some very special opportunity. Things like, would I have connections to make ends meet? Would I have a job? Would I even go to college? And the likely answer is no, because that's a reality of many young people in China today. That's why you see there's a trend of people buying up scratch cards, lottery tickets, or trying to make it big as an influencer. People want to find ways where they can do quick shortcuts to make money because they don't see any other long-term solutions for them at present.
我在郑州收破烂，目前每个月的收入能达到5位数。以前也怕被身边的人歧视，但当你的认知达到一定程度的时候，可能这些就不重要了。现在目前情况是。
Now, you see, back in the 1980s, when the whole college entrance exam was reintroduced following the Cultural Revolution, people really thought for those two generations that you could change your life by doing it well on the exam and then making it to the university. And that's really what many parents experience are like. They benefited from that. They got their lives changed. Right, but the situation changed today. Nothing matters in college anymore. In a country where the sons are more valuable than the daughters, this whole focus of putting all of your hopes and dreams onto the only child, of course, there are many places that could go wrong. And that's just on the individual level. On a societal level, all of the hopes and dreams, all of these facade and the so-called, big China dream that the government has painted for its people, it's never come to realization. The facade, the apparent good economy, this image lasted maybe 10 to 20 years. Sure, people got rich temporarily. And then when COVID came, all of the shortcomings were exposed. Today, the fewer jobs that are available demand a 996 work culture, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And delivery jobs are becoming competitive jobs, not because they pay really well, but because they are the most available jobs to young people. And young girls are forced to sell for a living.
1000块能让别人养了20年的女儿对你曲意逢迎。
And so I mentioned there's the persistent issue, which is that without connection in China, you can't do anything, or you can't start a company, you don't land a good job. Nepotism is real in China. Issues with corruption is real in China. So looking at all those different factors as a young person, you don't feel like you have an eagerness to perform, to do anything. Now, I mentioned, right, opportunities for jobs and careers, etc. It's not unique to China, right? We have problems in different countries as well. But it's the unique settings and the unique reflection of this combination of the people, the government, and the Communist Party that makes everything so much worse. And this repeats year after year after year, because millions today graduate, millions more go into college. But what I think fundamentally changed it is that more and more people are aware of the fact that they're being hit hard by this iron fist of communism, that reality is setting in. And they realize that the hopes and dreams that was promised by the Communist Party never realized. So you see less and less people are willing to engage, putting their effort, their labor into society for production. You're seeing less people spending money. Things are getting more expensive. So I call it the miserable generations because from the get-go, they were set up to be screwed over. And that's the end result of the communist rule, because after flip-flop policies for decades, after trying to intoxicate people by drowning them in materialistic values, today we see that the very generation that they wanted to be the most successful have come back and decided to tell them, hey, look, we're the least successful generation that's ever been around. All right, that's it today for the episode on China's miserable generations, particularly the young people. If you enjoyed the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye-bye.